Okay, babe. It is February 26, 2024. 4 years ago today, we hopped on an airplane to go to Oslo, Norway, and the plan was to leave from there, spend a few days in Oslo, go up to Svalbard, northernmost town, amazing place. And then from there, we'd fly back to Oslo and do a road trip from Oslo to Bergen.
Yep.
We have stuff happen when we travel.
All the time.
All the time.
Almost every time.
Almost every time. But 2020 was kind of big.
As most of the world knows.
And after we got back and I started editing video and posting videos, I just didn't know how to proceed because there was a lot going on. I don't enjoy conflict.
Well, there was a lot of unknowns. The whole world just didn't know how things were going.
And we didn't know beforehand. So we've been traveling for 24 years together,
yeah.
or 23 years together, and there's been a ton of stuff that has happened, from tsunamis and volcanoes and mudslides and hurricanes and all kinds of things. And we always are we're logical about things. We take calculated risk.
And adjusted along the way as we
figure things out.
Learn and keep navigating through.
Right. So, you take information and you gain knowledge. So when we left on February 26th, 2020, we were just finishing up a big project for work, and there was things coming out in the news about a new virus that they felt had transferred from animals to humans. Now, mind you,
as we've known in the past, we've had bird flu pandemics,
swine flu,
and
mad-cow,
and so for
SARS,
yeah, and they would announce, there's 455 deaths in 17 countries for the bird flu. Swine flu over the years had anywhere from 284 to 575,000 deaths. And so we were hearing these things and going, okay, this is another bird flu, swine flu sort of thing, just going off of the information that we were working with at the time. The world just didn't know.
And at the time, it seemed to be anyone who had traveled from China, from Wuhan.
And they were trying to quarantine or keep that under wraps. So on February 10th, they were saying that there was a little over 1,000 people who had been confirmed dead from this, and this was globally, about 1,000 people.
Calculated risk said, what's the chance? We'll go ahead and take our trip to Norway. Nothing was going on in Norway at the time. By the time that we left, 3 days before we left, Italy locked down. But again, Norway's quite a distance from Italy, and we didn't see there being a big risk with the knowledge that we had.
And again, going back to the bird flu, swine flu, thinking this is one of those other similar types of things that, there's always something like that going on somewhere in the world.
So we flew into Oslo, and there were some things that were kind of around. We went into one of the tourist places, and they had a sign that if you were coming from China and you had these symptoms, do you remember that one? It was in the train station, that one travel thing. They had some signs. Okay, we didn't think anything of it.
An announcement, a public announcement, and there was a few things that were just precautionary.
We enjoyed Oslo, had a good time. On the last day in Oslo, I started to have some sinus issues, congestion.
And that's something that almost every trip we have, just being in 2 or 3 different airports, 3 or 4 different planes,
recycled air, you know.
There's always a little bit of flu or something that you pick up along the way.
So I wasn't thinking anything of it. I mean, in all honesty, at that point, all reports coming out said that this new virus that didn't have a name at the time affected lungs, and it started in the lungs, and everything was coming out that way. So with the sinus, I didn't think about it, and I'll be honest with you now, I still think it was just normal cold. I don't think it was anything more serious than cold. I really don't.
I mean, we're coming from Florida, going to Svalbard. That's just
the weather's rough.
Few hundred miles from the North Pole. I mean, we're dealing with sub 30 below zero temperatures, so your sinuses are dried out.
So both of us ended up having some stuff, you know, whatever the stuff was. But still, didn't think anything of it. We spent a few days in Oslo. On March 2nd, we went from Oslo to Svalbard, northernmost town.
Different language. The news is not really available to us. You know, we're just not really paying attention because we're there enjoying the sights.
Not spending a lot of time on any kind of media reading about stuff.
Yeah, we didn't have cell service or anything.
And we're kind of introverts anyway. I think we may have eaten out in Svalbard once. Most of the time we self-catered. We enjoy each other's company, so we'd go to the grocery store and figure out some things.
And we enjoy cooking, and it's nice.
And we enjoyed it. And we both have this little cold going on, and I'm taking Tylenol cold and flu, and, you know, pretty much subdues all of the symptoms. Not around people a lot, and when we are around people, we've got a whole balaclava that covers our whole face, is frozen to it because, you know, it's negative 29 degrees there. We did notice when we landed at the airport in Svalbard, in Longyearbyen, that there were signs posted. Again, it all said if you traveled in China, if you've, you know, and you show symptoms, not thinking too much about it, not worrying too much about it. And if you worry about a lot of things, you'll never travel because there's always something terrifying going on. So we've been on flights and out of the country since February 26th. On March 2nd, we flew from Oslo to Svalbard, and we didn't realize that on March 3rd there were 60 cases announced in the U.S. And we had no idea that there was an announcement like that at the time. And 60 cases is not very many.
And then on March 6th, we ended up flying from Svalbard to Oslo to start our road trip to Bergen.
Again, through a lot of that, we were self-catering. We were staying in Airbnbs. We stayed to ourselves whether there's something going on or not. So it really wasn't that hard.
And as we're driving through, we'll see a little stave church off to the side, and we'll go check it out.
Take some pictures.
3 or 4 other people walking the acreage around the area, so there really was very little.
And we rented a car, so we're not taking public transportation. And maybe right now we're making excuses for ourselves because we do know what continues to happen in the world afterwards. But at that time, we could only base things on the information that we had. I mean, fair enough.
Treating it like it was a previous swine flu or bird flu thing, and said, you know, they'll figure it out. It'll be contained. It's not going to go global.
On the 7th, we were driving from Oslo to Vigeland, where we had an Airbnb. Right. And we stopped in Koblenz to get something to eat, and we went into a pharmacy to get some cold medicine for me. In hindsight, something else that I learned is that with the healthcare system in Norway, if you need something for cold, flu, or anything else, you go to the doctor. Their pharmacies are really more like what's the health food store that is here?
Yeah, nutritional supplements and things like that. They might have the form of Tylenol or something like that.
For headaches.
For headaches, but that's pretty much it. There is no over-the-counter anything. If you need something of that nature, that you go
to the doctor.
You get a prescription.
Yeah.
Everything is a prescription there, pretty much.
So that was something that we learned in hindsight. You live and you learn. We also realized that there was fear developing around this new virus. When we went in to ask for something for my sinuses, the young pharmacist there first asked if I was ill, and then he took 3 steps back away from us and very quickly told us that they didn't have anything for sinus. So this little place was in a shopping mall, and you may have noticed I sound funny. To admit it or not, I don't know, but I have got a little bit of cold and flu, as I always do when we travel. I pick up something every single time. So I've been treating myself with Dayquil and NyQuil, but I've run out. So we went to an apothecary, a pharmacy, and thought that we could pick up something there. We walk into the pharmacy and we go to, we're looking around, and a gentleman comes up and goes, "Do you need help?" And I was like, yeah, medicine for sinus. The guy looked like he was ready to...
No, he asks then, are you sick?
And I said, my sinuses. And
he just kind of took 3 steps, literally took 3 steps back, and just kind of pointed in a general direction. He said, "Well, this is this, and that is that."
But we don't have anything for sinus. And we decided to just get out of there before somebody grabbed me and threw me into quarantine. It felt strange at the time that his fear seemed so palatable, because, again, we hadn't been watching the news. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how everything was developing.
But there was definitely a sense of urgency that we should probably leave soon before some authorities show up.
So
didn't you get kind of...
I did.
Yeah, there was definitely
the guys in the white coats are going to come in through the back and grab me.
Something else is going on that we haven't been a part of yet or know about.
And again, we're on a road trip. We're only staying for one night in each little B&B on the way to Bergen.
And so we're on the road most of the time.
So we are not connected with what's going on. We just have these little hints of things along the way.
And through mountain passes and things like that, even if we could find a radio station that was English speaking, we wouldn't have it for very long.
We continue our road trip, and again, most of it was self-catering anyway. We are more aware of things by then. I think because we're starting to see, we would go to a museum or something, and mind you, it's the off season, so there's not a lot of people there anyway, and a lot of stuff is outdoors. But we would go to a museum, and they would have duct taped.
Yeah, they'd have an old makeshift 4x4 post duct taped with a Purell hand sanitizer, and say, "Please use this before you open the door," or something along those lines.
And so we're like, okay, there's got to be something more going on. There's precautions popping up.
And they're making adjustments in there, before they get something that's actually official.
And we try to be very aware of our surroundings, so those things popping up kind of set off a few alarms. Again,
things are getting a little more serious. Things are getting a little closer. They're getting nervous about this.
We've never been fear-driven. We're not the type who... We take all of the facts that are around us and try to make a informed decision.
Deductive reasoning.
Yeah, deductive reasoning. But we are especially now looking back in hindsight, so we were seeing things that...
And it was all just called, you'll hear us on the video, coronavirus. Because they weren't even calling it COVID, or they didn't really have the name quite ironed out at the time.
We are both still kind of got the sniffles and the cold, and
So we're trying to sequester ourselves.
we are, and kind of avoiding crowds. A lot of self-catering. We have eaten at a few restaurants, but we have been good. We've been hand sanitizing and all the other stuff. And the coronavirus has gotten people
Crazy. We're hearing about it from home. They're hoarding toilet paper. We're hearing all kinds of stuff.
Leave it to us. There's always something going on when we travel. Always.
We're scheduled to leave on March 12th.
To return home to the U.S.
So on March 11th, we started getting calls from family members asking us if we're going to make it back.
And we're like, yeah, we're planning on...
Yeah, our flight leaves tomorrow morning.
And they're like, no, there's been an announcement. And we're like, okay, well, what does that mean? What do you mean an announcement?
So I guess on March 11th, the World Health Organization made an announcement that this was an official pandemic. And in the news, the president had announced over the news media a national emergency, and was saying that all flights from Europe were going to be canceled at midnight on March 13th. We were scheduled to arrive at 10 p.m. on, wasn't it on the 12th?
I believe that's how it worked.
But the information was kind of foggy in the beginning, because what we were hearing from family and the first few things that we looked up online, because we did have internet, and at that point we are looking at the news because this could affect us a lot.
We were trying to get the specifics, because they were saying, well, at midnight on March 13th, and there's always confusion on, okay, well, is that actually on the 13th, or is that the midnight, of the 14th? And so just getting...
Because midnight is that breaking point between days.
And they're like, well, on the 13th. Well, that means that...
Well, the day changes from the 12th to the 13th at midnight. So is it midnight on the 12th?
Midnight on the 13th is really, you've got the 12th, and you will not have the 13th to get back.
Midnight was a really bad time to determine it. It depended on whether they wanted to stop everything on the 12th, or whether they wanted to stop everything on the 13th, and how you looked at midnight. So we weren't positive, but we were to arrive back in the U.S. at 10 p.m. on the 12th.
Which effectively meant that in those 2 next hours, that's whenever they would cut the...
So there was
flights.
A little bit of concern at that point. I also went online and delved deeper into it, and instead of taking the message that was released on the news that said canceling all flights, banning anyone from coming in, upon further investigation, it said except for U.S. citizens.
Which was information that we hadn't really heard being there in Bergen.
Well, everything was happening so very fast. I mean, think about this. From the time that we left until the time we came back was just 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks, everything changed.
Well, this is it.
Yep.
Last day. I don't think I can see you too well because it's pretty dark. The car was covered in hail and ice.
Yep, so we got it all chiseled off, and on top of that, they're kind of declaring a national emergency right now. They're talking about closing flights for the next 30 days starting tomorrow
at midnight.
Our flight gets in a couple hours before midnight as of right now.
Well,
on
Thursday.
If we don't have any delays. The emergencies and the flights are, again, because of the coronavirus. We'll see how crazy the airport is. And
there's a lot of misinformation. I guess Mr. Trump, he had a speech yesterday where he told everyone that they were forbidding travel from Europe to the U.S. So it was vague, it was not clear, a lot of misunderstandings, but from what we can see today, after clarifications were made, American citizens and nationals, it's not going to be a problem for. But the way things change, I want to get home, period.
And so we'll see how the flights go. If they are, in fact, closing all flights from Europe, we might have to make other flights to other countries and then come in that way. So
possibly, I don't know.
We'll figure it out as we go along.
But, you know, even traveling to some place as easy as Norway, always an adventure.
Always.
Jeez.
And even at that time, as we were flying back to the U.S., we were thinking, okay, we got to get home. We have projects. We have business contracts. All of these things. We had no idea what the next year was going
To actually be like.
to be like at all.
Hello.
So where are we?
We're in the Bergen Airport.
Okay. And it's what time?
I don't even know right now. It's 7:30.
7:30. So you can see the Bergen to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Atlanta. I don't care. As long as we get home, with all of this crap going on, I don't know what's going to happen. And we can't afford to be in Europe for 30 days, both financially, and we've got contracts at home that we get started on that start March 26th.
Yeah.
So, bam, 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 we're right back in it when we get home. Plus, there's a poopy dog that needs us. So, I don't know if the host family will be willing to keep him for another 30 days, or if they do, they may decide that she's theirs and we don't get her. So, we got to get home. Coronavirus. It's always something with us, isn't it? No, we're not spies. I swear it.
So we get to the airport, and we're all set to go. We've got, we've pre-checked in, everything else. We have people starting to come up to us, and they're like, how did you get this flight? We're trying to get a flight back. They had flown in that day from the U.S. to Norway, and they were trying to figure out how to get on a flight to go straight back home. So at that point, we realized that for a lot of people, this had become very serious. And we're like, okay, we can't miss any of our connections. We've got to get home because they're talking about a 30-day ban. Norway's expensive. Living in Norway for 30 days for us probably would have been quite the hardship. Not to mention missing out on work that we thought we would be doing.
Which we didn't have anyway.
Which we didn't have anyway. So we got back to the U.S. 2 hours before the travel ban went into place. And I started to put together our videos from the trip, and I started to post them. And by the time I got to the video of Oslo to Koblenz, I just didn't know what to do at that point. Things were starting to get kind of controversial. People were there was a lot of fear at the time. I didn't want to be disrespectful to anyone. I didn't want to be flippant. And I just wasn't quite sure what to do with the last bit of our trip. I was kind of embarrassed at our ignorance because, again, in hindsight. So I stopped the playlist with Beagley, I think, is where I stopped it, and never did complete the playlist. And today I was thinking about it, and I was going through some of my older videos because I've been posting about Antarctica, and I was like, I want to finish out the playlist because it was a full trip, and this is how I remember trips, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that without a disclaimer video. Or an explanation of some sort during a period of time that was probably the strangest of my entire life. Yours?
I don't know. I've had some pretty strange things.
And yeah, us with our travel, it's always an adventure, isn't it, sweetheart?
It's always an adventure.